Welcome to another segment of the Veterans History Project. My name is Brian Merrill, and we'll be filming this interview from my residence in DeLand, Florida. The date is 24 October 2005. My videographer and production specialist will be my wife Rosa Merrill, and today's guest will be Les Hollenback. Out of the China, Burma, and India theater of World War II came one of our most illustrious and unusual combat units, so-called the Merrill's Mauraders. The Merrill's Marauders was born out of a meeting between Prime Minister Churchill and our President Roosevelt on the 18th of August, 1943. They decided during that meeting that they wanted to begin the take-back of Burma. The Japanese held Burma as an entity vital to our final push onto Japan. But they knew they didn't have the resources to do it all at once, and so they decided that the answer was a hit-and-run operation, a guerrilla-style warfare behind enemy lines, attacking them from the rear and disrupting his transportation and communications wherever possible. Well, that gave birth to a great opportunity, career opportunity for Frank Merrill and the Marauders. One of the 3,000 men who made it happen was today's guest, Les Hollenback. Les was not a combatant so much as he was in support of the Marauders' greatest transportation secret. Well, maybe not tremendously secretive, but it was vital to getting the job done and getting the weapons and supplies over the incredible mountainous trails they had to traverse. Yes, Les did take his own side weapons in hand when he absolutely had to, but his primary job, his primary role in MOS, in the military, was to shod this military secret, to make this military secret happy, well-fed, and content as far as possible, and to act as a semi-professional veterinarian when the need arose. That military secret for transportation, it was the Army mule. And so now, to tell a soldier's story, as only he can, let's get in touch with Les Hollenback. Were you inducted into the U.S. Army?
This was in December of 1942.
And I believe you said you were living in Illinois, so that's where it happened.
Yes, I was living in Illinois, and we went to Scott Field. That's in, I think it's in East St. Louis. Scott Field is.
And I think that you were telling me earlier that you wanted to do one kind of thing, and the Army saw it a different way. Explain that.
Well, I learned to shoe horses with my dad, and I had heard that there was a horseshoeing school in the Army. And so when I went to the reception center, I asked them if I could go to the horseshoeing school. And they thought I would be a good Jeep driver, and I didn't think I didn't really want to do that. So I kind of argued with them about the horseshoeing school.
And you prevailed?
Yes, I did. They sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas, and that's where the horseshoeing school was at, and it'd been there for a number of years, ever since World War II even.
I guess that I would assume that there would be other experienced horseshoe men at that school. Were there?
Oh yes, there was others there. And I can remember there was a sergeant that taught the manual shoeing, and there was a Mr. Churchill. He was the one that taught us the anatomy of the horse's foot and so on, like that.
But you had prior experience. What percentage of the other trainees also had prior experience?
I think there was one or two of them that had, but the rest of them didn't.
Okay. Mm-hmm. How long did that take?
They kept us there for 12 weeks, and it was every day except on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And so we had a good training, and we shod horses right there and everything.
And after that?
After that, I was shipped to Fort Bliss, Texas, and they had mule packs, and I didn't even know anything about a mule pack, but we soon learned what they were. But
what do you mean by mule pack? The gear that you put on a mule for carrying things?
yes, a mule pack, they have a regular pack saddle that they put on mules, and this saddle happened to be the Phillips saddle, and it weighed like 90-some pounds. So most of the time there were two men that put the pack saddle on the mule. And some mules were ornery, and you'd be surprised at some of the guys they were old mule people from Missouri and the remount stations, and they knew how to handle them, and they'd grab an ear and twist it and put the saddle on him.
Yeah. So you were learning a lot of specific information about mules.
Yes, sir, I was.
But you're telling me that some of them are ornery. The reputation is that they're all pretty ornery.
Well, they're not all ornery, but there was a lot of them that are, really.
How long were you at Fort Bliss?
I arrived at Fort Bliss, I believe, in May of 43, and we shipped out in October of 43. But in the meantime, we had trained the mules, and we had taken them up into New Mexico, up into the mountains. And we rode the mules up there and back on a training mission.
I guess you were starting to get a vague idea of the kind of assignment that the Army had in mind for you, but did you know specifically what part of the world you were headed for?
We had no idea, really. We were just training, and no one knew anything as far as I know. And my job, we used to go down to the shop every day, and we'd shoe so many mules. And this was a regular job that we had to do.
So you cleared out of Fort Bliss as a unit?
Yes, we shipped out of Fort Bliss as a unit. We loaded all the mules and all the equipment, men and equipment. We loaded them on a train in Fort Bliss, and the train was headed to New Orleans. And I guess maybe by that time we'd found out that we were going overseas, you know.
Right.
And when we got to New Orleans, it's kind of a funny thing that the engines in Texas are so big, you know, but they were too big for New Orleans. The ground was so weak, they had to change the engines there to pull us on in. And the ship, I think, was about ready for us, and we unloaded the mules, and we put 300 mules on the ship.
That, sounds like the transporting mules on a train is one thing. On a ship, it must really be a challenge in terms of things like, let's say, cleanliness and whatnot. What are the challenges involved there?
Well, there wasn't, they had it all figured out pretty well. Down on the second deck, there was a bunch of mules, and up on the upper deck there was a lot of mules, and these were stalls that the mules stayed in, and the mule never got to lay down, and he never got out of the stall. And the way you cleaned the stalls, you would kind of clean it out, and then you'd wash it overside with a hose.
Okay.
So there were no problem there.
The waste all went into the ocean?
The waste all went into the ocean.
All right.
And the feed that we had hay and oats, and they were all down on a lower deck. And so this is the way they were situated.
So the basic structure was a Liberty ship, but it was retrofitted to handle the animals and your...
Right.
And so there were, did you say 300 mules? 300
head of mules.
How many men were on board?
I can't say for sure, but in our outfit there was like 80-some men. But then we had Merchant Marine on the ship, and we had Navy on the ship. And there was not enough Navy to man the guns, so we had to help man the guns. And I never will.
So you got more particular training on how to fire these deck guns. You wouldn't have been familiar with that.
No, we weren't familiar with them, but
Yeah.
I think the Navy probably fired them, and we were helpers maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, I knew I helped on the gun on the back end of the ship, or on the stern, I should say.
Okay.
And it was a 5-inch gun, and they gave me asbestos gloves that clear up here because I was catching the hot shells that come out, or the casings that come out.
Right. So you're shipping out of New Orleans. What is your objective out of New Orleans?
We was headed for Norfolk, Virginia to catch a convoy.
Smooth voyage?
Not really. We run into trouble around Miami because we had thrown out wood and was washing the decks down and everything. And as we got around Miami, I never will forget one night we had a great big explosion. And so we all went upstairs.
What was your first thought when you heard the explosion?
I don't know if I had a thought or not.
No.
But when we got upstairs, someone had told us that the torpedoes had blown up beside us. And so we was all sitting around, and the merchant marines, they told us that there would be another one thrown at us. Because they had been in that situation before.
Were they right?
Yes, they were right. About daylight, they threw another one at us, and it blew up beside us also. And,
so it wasn't a direct hit, it was like a near miss.
Right. Well, it wasn't like a near miss because it blew up. If it had been a miss, it would have went past us, but it blew up right beside us. I don't know how far out, but the concussion even busted light bulbs inside the ship. And there was damage to it, so we had to pull into Miami to get repaired before we could go to Norfolk.
Did you lose any mules, lose any men?
We lost one mule on the whole trip. And this is hardly to believe because most people won't believe it. We was on that ship for 84 days. And I'll try to tell you, we went to Norfolk. And we was in a storm for 1 week. And the lifeboats, I never will forget, they were already out over the sides. And a Liberty ship rocks side to side where other ships go up and down. And the lifeboats would dip water. This is how it would go over. And we had one mule to get down and broke a leg or something. And this is the only mule that we lost on the whole deal.
Oh, because of the action with the rocking back and forth. So you had to destroy him.
Right. So then we shipped, we went to Gibraltar, we went through the Mediterranean Sea.
Was that via convoy, perhaps?
Yes, this is in a convoy. We was in a convoy all the way.
Good.
And in the Mediterranean, we had another scare. There was, we had British escorts with us.
Right.
And they claimed there was a sub tried to get in inside the convoy, and somebody had dropped a depth charge or something, and we had the feel of that, so we run upstairs that night too. But we went
Here
through,
we go again, you were thinking, huh?
Right, we were thinking. So we went through the Suez Canal.
By the way, sir, did you know at this point when you're in the Suez Canal, did you know yet what your objective was? Had they told you yet?
I think, I'm not absolutely sure, but I believe they did. I believe they told us we was going to India or like that. Anyway, and we stopped at Cairo and we got fresh water and so on and so forth. And the Red Sea, they docked a little bit, and it's kind of strange, but they had, and this is in the fall, and they had all kinds of vegetables. You could buy little boats, come out and sold you stuff and this and that. And so then we went across the Indian Ocean, and we had to go down, and this, we stopped well, before that there was Thanksgiving. And so we stopped at Colombo, or the island of Ceylon, and we went to Colombo. And this was Christmas. And so then after that we went into up to Calcutta. And this was, we was on the boat for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day.
84 days.
84 days. I think it was the 7th of January that we landed at Calcutta.
So you offloaded the mules, your special equipment, and all the men.
There's one thing that really sticks in my mind when we was unloading, because we had straw and hay in the bottom hold. And these bales had 3 wires on them, and I don't know if you know much about baling or not, or hay.
A little bit.
Well, these bales would weigh, I'm sure, over 150 pounds or more. And I can't believe that they set one of them bales on top of one of these guys' heads and he'd walk off with it. And I still can't hardly...
Was that a local porter you're talking about?
The Indian people.
And they were smaller than you, too.
Oh, yeah, right. And I don't see how he could carry that big bale of hay on his head. But he did. And so then we ended up getting on a train, and we went to a camp called Diagar.
Okay.
And this is where the 5307 was training.
Okay, the 5307 Composite Group.
Unit, Division.
Which later became known as?
Merrill's Marauders.
Merrill's Marauders.
After General Merrill.
Oh, okay, he was a general at that point? Because
yes, he was a general.
During the war.
No, he was a general at that time.
Good.
And I believe, I think, back in 42, General Stilwell was run out of Burma, and Merrill was with him. But I don't think Merrill was a general at that time.
Okay. But when you got there, did you receive a briefing by Merrill or one of his officers? I
really don't remember. I really don't remember, because the training was under a guy by the name, he was an Englishman, Wingate.
Oh, yes.
The training was under Wingate, because he'd already been in the jungle.
That's another famous name.
Right. He'd been in the jungle, and they'd fought, and they'd been come out and back forth. And we did realize, we was told that we was going to be a deep penetration outfit. And we also was told that we would probably lose 80% of our people because of the deep penetration.
Did that prove to be the case?
No, it was only about 20%. Actually, it's battled.
Okay. And how long did that advanced training or in the field training take, sir?
Well, we didn't hardly have any, because the mules, we had to get the mules ready, and the mules were dispensed out to different parts of the unit, which there were 3 battalions, A, B, and C, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, and I was attached to the 2nd battalion, and we was only there less than a month, really, because in February we was in Aledo, in Assam.
Time to move out to Lido.
It was about maybe 1,000 miles or more that we had to go by train.
Okay.
And if you know trains in India, some of the trains have different gauges on their rails.
Yeah.
And a boxcar for their train would only hold 6 mules.
Okay.
And I slept in between them with a hammock. There was enough room to hang a hammock between their heads.
Not exactly the Sheridan.
Well, it was pretty good. It was better than laying on boards, though, really.
Yeah. Did you have to change trains because of the difference in gauge?
We had to change trains. Yeah. We had to change. One time we had to ferry a river to get into another train to go.
Yeah.
And this is how we ended up in Aledo in Assam.
Okay.
And this is where the Aledo Road started, just a little ways
Was
out.
that your staging area, Lido?
It was at that time.
And you got the orders to move out, and what happened then?
We had orders to leave, and we started walking up the Aledo Road in the columns, all three battalions.
Yeah.
And I never will forget, there's one thing that always sticks in my mind, is that we didn't have radios that they'd crank on, you know. And the guys were listening, and there was a woman come on, and it was Tokyo Rose. And she said, "Do you know what's going to happen to you? You're all going to be killed." And she was telling us where we was at and where we was going and that.
Her purpose was to hurt your morale.
Oh,
Did it have
absolutely.
that effect?
I don't think
Did
it
it discourage the
did.
men?
It didn't bother us. We didn't pay no attention to it.
No. But you listened to it. You must have been amused or entertained by her in some way.
Yeah, it was kind of amusing, really.
Yeah.
And later on, after I got back home, I never realized, but she was American.
Yes.
And I think she came back to the United States afterwards, sometime or other.
Now, speaking about you're going out and you're moving out in 3 columns. Give us an idea what those columns looked like. Was it like all mules and men, or were there some trucks involved?
No trucks. We had no trucks. We had all mules.
Yeah.
And the columns would be strung out for miles, really.
Okay.
Because you have, let's see, there was like 1,000 men in one battalion. It was short of that, but real close.
Yeah.
And then the mules in between, and you had a headquarters also.
What did you have on those mules?
Do what?
What were the mules packing?
The mules packed almost everything, really. They had to pack their own grain.
Yeah.
They had to pack all the ammunition for the mortars and the machine guns
It's heavy
and all
stuff.
of that stuff.
That is heavy stuff.
Heavy stuff.
How much could a mule carry? How many pounds?
Well, if you really get down to it, and the artillery, the barrel on an artillery gun, I think weighs around 400 pounds.
Okay.
And one mule carried the barrel. And the mule has to be really a good mule, and he has to kind of have a special gait,
Yeah.
a walk, so that the barrel rides pretty level all the time.
Makes sense.
But the mules carried the heavy radios and everything like that.
Okay, so the pack weighs about 100 pounds, I think you said, and
Yeah,
then
right.
the typical load would be 400. So that mule is toting about 500 pounds.
Could be. And then, and like the blacksmiths had a mule, we had a forge,
Yeah.
and we had a toolbox, and this we had a mule to carry all of this too.
How often were your services required as blacksmiths?
Well, it depends on if they lost a shoe or something, but ordinarily it wasn't required real often at this time, unless they lost a shoe or something.
But I guess you'd be inspecting the mules and their feet whenever you stopped.
Well, the mule skinner,
Yeah.
or the one that was leading the mule, would check his feet for that.
Mule skinner.
Yeah, this is what they're called. They're called a mule skinner. You can pull this up on the internet. This mule skinner, and you'll find out a whole lot about him.
I understand. I'd be feeling nervous as a mule if I knew that a mule skinner was going to be working on me. Interesting thing is that none of the men were riding on mules. The mules were used strictly for the equipment.
Right.
So all you fellows were on foot,
Right.
hiking across country. Before I forget to ask you, can you give me a rough estimate of how many miles you traversed on foot during this campaign?
Well, they claim it was between 700 and 800 miles. But this first, when we first started out
Yeah.
Toledo Road,
Yeah.
The Lido Road was just really a little patch that they had just scratched out.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the trucks couldn't really get up it hardly at all. And we walked up the Lido Road. It was like 120 miles. And we walked that in 10 days. And this is before the first campaign. This is when we hit the Burma border.
Was this some of the worst terrain, or was it moderate?
Oh, this was easy.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing, because I think you told me that as a unit, you men hadn't hiked all that much.
No, we hadn't. And after we got to Burma,
Yes.
then we left the road, and we never walked on a road after that.
All right.
No roads at all. All the trails up in the mountains.
Maybe you could just take us fast forward to your first big engagement and what happened.
Well, the first engagement was called a town by the name of Wallaboom, and it was set on a river. And the road there was a road through Wallaboom, but we were not on it.
Sure.
We took back trails and our objective was to block the road so the Japanese could not get supplies up the road.
Right.
And we was already behind the lines at that time, not very far, because the Chinese was on the road pushing down. Now the Chinese had trucks, they even had a few tanks on that road. And but when we put up a roadblock, then all the firepower is aimed at us. And that's the first time I ever heard an artillery shell. And it went over our heads, and you could hear it whizzing by.
Okay.
And that was a new experience for most of us.
That was your artillery or the enemy's artillery?
No, the enemies. The enemy's artillery.
You didn't have heavy artillery?
No, we didn't have artillery at that time. We just had mortars.
Mortars, yeah. You heard it whistle, and when it hit?
It would hit behind us, and but it exploded. And the mules, they had never heard any of this, and they'd never been in any of that either.
Yeah.
So that was quite an experience there for me. So
Just controlling the mules was a problem when all hell broke loose.
yeah, well, you try to get the mules off of the trails and keep them covered, because there was Japanese planes at that time. There were still Japanese had planes over Burma at that time too, because they had almost all of Burma at that time.
Yeah, so there's always the danger of strafing or bombing.
Right.
This particular objective, were you successful?
Oh yes, and all we had to do is to block the road for maybe 24 hours, and then we pulled out and run.
Right.
And so we'd run back into the mountains up on the trails, and you still had to be careful because there were still patrols for Japanese on the trails also.
So you guys were, you'd been pretty well trained, but you were learning the tricks of the trade as you went, too.
Yes, as far as, but you must remember now that we'll go back, and Merrill's was say all volunteers. And a lot of these volunteers had been in combat before, and they all knew the ropes, a lot of them.
Oh, good.
So they helped the greener ones know what was going on. You know?
All right. And so eventually that passed down to you, the horseshoe men.
And we was going through elephant grass. Elephant grass is 7-8 feet tall. And this is the first time I know it is. But when we was walking down through this elephant grass on a trail, there were 3 or 4 Japanese dead there that the guys had killed.
Yeah, the first time you had seen the consequences.
First time I'd ever seen anything like that, right.
I'm wondering, here you are out doing this rear guard action, this hit and run action, and carrying your own supplies, but eventually I would think you would run out of supplies, ammo, food, etc.
Right. This is true, and the way we got supplies was from the air. And these were C-47s.
Right.
They were loaded up back in, I don't think it was Aledo, it's another town, I can't tell you the name of it. And they were loaded, and they would fly over to a special rice paddy that was kind of cleared.
Yeah.
And they would drop these supplies. To start with, I believe maybe all the time, the grain was dropped, free drop in a grain sack.
Yeah.
And, but almost everything was dropped in parachutes.
And so you would just coordinate by radio, I guess,
Right.
that they were going to be at this place for a
Right.
drop. Did those drops always come off as scheduled, or were some of them snafu'd?
You shouldn't ask that, Brian,
Uh-oh.
because it didn't. And we was on K rations, and I don't know if you know what a K ration is.
Well, why don't you describe it for us?
Well, it's kind of hard to describe. It's in a little box. It looks like a Cracker Jack box, really.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bigger than that. And that's your whole meal. And you have 3 of these boxes for a day.
For a day.
And I can't really explain everything that's in them, but there's crackers, and there's a little can of stuff, and
Yeah.
a D-bar, and there was cigarettes in them. I think there was 3 or 4 cigarettes in a little package. But this is what's supposed to carry you over. And we could carry them in a pack.
Did you
We
like
could
K
carry-
ration? Did you like that? Did you enjoy it? Was it
No,
tasty?
they weren't that great.
Not really.
But they were, I mean, it would keep you going.
Okay.
And so, but like the airdrops, sometimes it would get so that we could not get them airdrops, and we was going without the rations, period. And then there was times.
Was there a time when you ran out of rations altogether?
Right.
What did you do then?
You have to do without, or you get rice. We could get rice if we could find out where the Japanese had it, or the Burmese, and we could.
Did you resort to killing any of the animals around?
Well, not at this time, I don't think.
Okay.
But and later on in some of our marches, I know that we tried to walk all night long, a couple of different times.
Yeah.
To get to where we could get an airdrop.
Okay.
And it's pretty hard to move a column like that with mules and everything at night through the jungles.
Well, you guys are, as you say, walking these hundreds and hundreds of miles, and you're concerned about taking care of the feet of the animals.
Right.
How about your own feet? How about the diseases and accidents, etc., that happen to your guys?
I'll tell you about the next campaign.
Okay.
And this might help you some too.
Okay.
We kind of split up, and the 2nd Battalion had a mission to go to a town called Enicaton.
Uh-huh.
And this was about 40 miles behind enemy lines. And the 3rd Battalion was going to go part way, and the 1st Battalion was going a different direction. And they were going to hit the road, and we were going to hit the road, but 2 different places. And ours was the longest way down. So we went on this mountain trail, and we went through a town by the name of Napunga, and we went down from the mountain from like 3,000 feet down to 0 level to get to and we had to go to this river, and we followed the river, and we probably crossed this river, they claim, 80 times to get to the road. And we never did get to the road. We got close to the road. And that night they set up and everything. And the next morning, the firing already started. And the Japanese came at our outfit across the open field, and the guys just shot them down time and time and time again.
So many times you hear that story, frontal assault by the Japanese, and you mow them down. It seems as though they almost never learned.
I know.
The war.
But, well, then, that was their policy, really.
Okay.
Anyway, that evening...
Your fellows, like I say, you didn't have the heavy stuff. All you had was light machine guns and mortars and rifles.
Right. Yeah, we just had that 30 caliber machine gun and the mortars.
Okay.
And I don't know what time it was, but we pulled out of there again.
Yeah.
Now we had to go back this river 80 times again, cross it, back through the mud, like almost 6-7 inches deep all the time through the rice paddy, right back up the same mountain, back up 3,000 feet straight up.
Yeah.
And I never will forget, I was at the tail end of the column, I'm sure, with Colonel Hunter, which at one time Colonel Hunter took over Merrill's at one time for a while. And the mules might get down on this trail going up. And Colonel Hunter, he was a great shot. He'd kill a mule because we didn't have time to get him up. We was really running. And he would draw a line between the eye and an ear, an X, and the mule would never struggle. I mean, he was dead that
Instantly dead.
Right. Because we didn't have time to get him up or the equipment or anything.
Yeah. How about if the man was injured? You must have had incidents where they had broken legs or...
Yeah, well, that, we had, we carry them.
Or dysentery or malaria.
Well, there wasn't much of that right at this time because this wasn't very old.
Still early on.
Yeah. And it was there, but there was a pill that we were supposed to take called Atabrain, and that was supposed to calm the malaria down because you was going to get bit anyway.
Seemed like it was somewhat effective.
Right, it'd help you.
So a man gets hit, he gets badly injured, you just carry him with you.
Right.
Does he get to ride a mule, or is he carried by his fellow?
Well, you could ride a mule if you had a mule,
Yeah.
but they all had packs, so it'd be hard to do, you know.
And if the injury is serious, how do you evac him?
Well, at that point we couldn't.
Yeah.
We had to get back up on the hill, and we camped right on top of the hill. And I know Colonel Hunter was with us, and we never even dug foxholes there because we didn't think that the artillery would reach us at all from the Japanese. And the next morning, we were getting ready to move out to go back up, back to Macomb on down. And about the time we hit the trail, the artillery started hitting right around us. So we got back up to the trail, or back up to Macomb. And if we had people, then we could take them down into the valley about maybe 2 or 3 miles. And the planes were landing down there. They had a little place where they could land them. And we were given orders to stay at Napunga. And so we set up a perimeter there. And there was one little water hole, spring in one corner of this perimeter. And finally we had to move the perimeter in, and the water was outside the perimeter. And then we didn't have water. And then the Japanese surrounded us, and we couldn't get out or go any place, or nobody could get into us. And
you're in a bad fix there, because your mobility is 2/3 of your strength.
Right. And there was, this lasted for 14 days.
Yeah.
And they finally dropped water to us. Otherwise, you were drinking water out of a mud puddle.
Why didn't you get wiped out by the Japanese? What saved you?
Well, we just had firepower, and one of the main things, his name is mentioned quite often, and he got, I don't know what kind of medals. His name was Roy Matsumoto, and he's American Japanese, and he was an interpreter for the outfit, and he could almost tell us when they were going to charge, and we would be on that side to throw all the firepower at that side.
Okay.
And
Did he get radio intercept? Was that what?
no, listen, he
Just
even slipped out.
Across the field.
Yeah, he even slipped
Wow.
out of the perimeter and listened, and he did things like that. And later on in the days, we had our let's see, P-51s and the P-38s, and they would drop bombs outside of our area. And also, the 3rd Battalion was down below, and they were trying to get to us. And for a couple days they did, but then they were shut off, and they couldn't get to us. And eventually, in the 3rd Battalion, there was a bunch of guys that was artillerymen that had volunteered to go. And so they dropped 2 artillery guns to them. And they manned them and put them up, and they didn't even have an officer. They were just men that knew it, you know. And so they started firing the artillery guns over our heads and hitting the Japanese, and then in front of us also.
Did you have to eventually fight your way out?
They broke through to us, and the Japanese finally gave up because with all the bombing and the artillery guns and this. And there's one day I never will forget, and this is Easter Sunday, April the 9th.
Yeah.
That's the day that we got out of it.
Oh, yes.
And the people that come to us, they couldn't believe what they found, because there was mules, dead mules all around. And immediately, within a day, maggots is all over this stuff. And this is what we were living with all the time. There was a lot of dead mules. And there was people that was dead and wounded and everything.
You hear about the troops, some of the men, and especially infantry, getting a real bad case of the jitters. I think, what do they call it? Shell shock.
Yeah.
Was that a problem with any of your troops?
I don't know. I don't know if there was any like that. There probably was, you know.
Yeah.
But,
well, you didn't personally observe it.
Yeah. But after we...
How did you get through it personally? I mean, you were right in the middle of all of that. You hadn't had that much combat
No,
before,
I don't know. As far as I know, I was all right, really. And after we got off of there, they took, and even going down the trail with all the bombing and that, you could see parts of people up in the trees and this and that. And the bamboo over there gets like 4 or 5 inches through. It's real bamboo, real big, and real tall stuff. But the bombs and that, they just about destroyed a lot of it, you know, from where they had been bombing it.
Wow.
But when the people took our places over, you know what a flamethrower is.
Yes, I do.
Well, they burnt the whole top of that mountain off, where the mules and everything was at.
To more or less disinfect the area.
Oh, it was terrible, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that your last major engagement, or were there more?
No, there was more. We didn't think there would be, because we went back down where the 3rd Battalion was at, and the Japanese were clearing out at that part.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know how long we was there, and I think we might have got a few more mules there, because we lost a bunch of them up there.
Yeah.
Because the mule is standing up, and the bombs are hitting in the trees and busting, and the shrapnel, you know, is hitting them.
Yeah, good target.
Yeah. So anyway, we go back down and we get all rusted up and everything, and then they give us another campaign for Michinal. And this is where the airfield is at, and this is what the main objective, so they could open up to the Burma Road that way.
How long did it take for you guys to secure Michigan?
Oh, it was quite a trip to get there, and I never did get there on that mission, because I think about a day out of Michigan, I was flown out in a Piper Club with malaria. And I never will forget, I know people talk about the temperatures and that, and I was in, they had a hospital back in Aledo, and I was on the outside of it in a tent, and the orderly took my temperature. It was 105.6.
You must have been delirious.
No, and he asked me, he said, can you walk inside? I said, sure. And I walked inside.
You must be a pretty tough man.
I don't know. I don't know.
What kind of treatment did you get?
Huh?
What kind of treatment did you get from
Well, I know it's quinine.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing they treated with it, I think, at that time was quinine.
All right.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to recover?
I'm not really sure. I really couldn't tell you because I'd had it afterwards too.
Yes.
And but it takes like 6-7 days or something like that.
Well, that's right. Some people never completely recover from malaria.
After I came home and was married, one time I had it. I had it one time, and I went uptown, and that time you could buy quinine, you know.
Right.
And I went uptown and bought quinine and took it. But you could buy it then.
Right. Now, in your job as a horseshoe specialist, horseshoer, and there actually was a job description in the MOS that said you were a horseshoer.
Right.
Okay. In your job as horseshoer, do you remember setting any personal records?
Not at this time. I don't believe. No, after we got back off on Napunga, we probably was shoeing down in the bottom, but like during up on Napunga and that, you're not worried about mules and shoes, you know.
Yeah, just
not right then anyway.
What's the greatest number of mules you remember shotting in one day?
Well, there was one, this is later on now.
Okay.
And this is when we were taking the mules to China. And there was a boy by the name of, well, we were all boys, Robert Rayleigh. And he was from Ohio. And there was others there too, I know, because we stopped one day taking these mules we was on the Burma road then. And we shot 14 of them in one day. And the thing about it, you were talking about being ornery and this and that. And I can remember we had to throw 10 of them and tie them up so we could finish shoeing them. And we did that, and we played with it because we were like 22, 23 years old, and we was having fun.
That can be a dangerous occupation. You can get kicked. They can crowd you against a stall or a tree. Did you get injured in all that time?
There's only one time in my whole life I've ever been kicked by a mule or a horse. And this is when we had unloaded the mules and brought them over to Diagar. And I never will forget it. I was shoeing this mule, and I had his front foot up between my legs, and he kicked me right above the eye with his hind foot. And I just kind of stumbled backwards, and I never will forget it. I threw the hammer at him, and man, I tried to hit him, but I missed him. I missed him.
So the score is less 2,000 mules won. But that one was pretty painful.
But I have never been kicked, and as far as shoeing horses, I'd done it over 40 years afterwards.
When the war was over, and by the way, when did you leave the Army? When do you and the Army part ways?
Well, there was a second campaign. This was with Mars Task Force, and it was started like in December, I believe, in '44.
Okay.
And our fighting was over, I believe, in April of '45. And the mules went back to Michigan, and they wanted the mules in China for the Chinese, so we prepared to take the mules to China. And the mules all walked. This is another 700-800 miles from Michigan to Kunming, China. Also, we go back, and from Michigan to Lashio, we walked another 400 or 500 miles there. And so when we finish up, when we're in China, the war ends. And we have enough points. Most of my old outfit has enough points to get out.
Right.
So we fly from Kunming, China, back to Karachi. I never will forget before we flew, the last shots I ever got in the Army, and we was up on top of a mountain, real close to the airfield. And we got 4 shots at a time, two in each arm, just walked through. I never will forget that. And the flight, you've heard so many stories about flying over the hump. This is over the Himalayan mountains,
Right.
which is some of the roughest.
C-47, I assume?
This is C-46. This is a step up.
Yep.
And this is the one they use mostly, I think, to fly over the hump. They use some C-47s, but, and anyway, I think there was about 30 of us in this plane. No seats at all. You just sit down on the floor. And man, it was a perfect day. I mean, he was up just so high, and everything was really pretty down below. So we get back to Karachi, and I'm not sure how long we stay in Karachi, but we're there for a while because we're waiting on a boat to take us back to New Jersey.
Okay.
And we get on this boat in, I think it's in November, and we head to New Jersey. And we dock in November in New Jersey. And when we land there, we're only there a few days, and I was shipped to Camp Grant in Illinois and got a discharge. And I was home in December, the 1st of December.
1945. And we had already had VE Day, we'd had VJ Day, and so you must have had some feeling of satisfaction. You contributed to the final victory.
Right.
Did you realize as you went along how special and how unusual your work was?
No, I never really thought of it. But you know, and later on in life, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I took my granddaughter, which she was like 25 or 6, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And I had, we went to Texas, and a fellow there by the name of Ben Phillips, he was a horseshoer, but originally he was in the 33rd Pack Troop. But we were called to go up on the Leader Road. This is after the Merrill's campaign. And there were replacement mules coming up the road. And there was hundreds of them, thousands of them probably. And Ben and I had been sent over there to shoe these mules because they were getting gravel in their foot and they were going lame. So, and this is how I met him. And this is like 50 years since I'd seen him. And so we went over and we stayed there for about a week and visited him. And I told Ben, I said, you know, Ben, I said, when we were shooting them mules on the Leader Road, we're both the same age.
Yeah.
We were 22 years old. And think of the responsibility that we had shooting them mules. Because you can really damage them, you know, people don't realize. And,
Sure.
And
if you use the wrong kind of nail and the wrong
well, if
place.
it goes the wrong way, it'll run in.
Yep.
It's the horse's wall, or the mule's wall,
Hit a blood vessel or something.
is just like your fingernail.
Yeah.
But underneath, inside the wall, there's blood vessel veins and nerves, and if
Gotcha.
the nail goes there, it's like you getting a splinter under your fingernail.
Sure.
So you can have infection the same as you have
And
infection.
you got it right just about every time.
You have to.
Well, Les, I see that you've got a uniform jacket on your lap. Tell me, first of all, how far back does that jacket go? All the way into World War II?
Oh yes, this goes all the way back. I bought this jacket from India, and one thing about your shirts and your jackets in India, we'd go get these tailored. And you know what? The men were tailors there, not the women.
They do a pretty good job?
Oh, they did a great job. They can make it fit just like it, you know, like it's manufactured on you.
And you actually wore that in the humid and hot climate of India, even though it's made out of, I assume, wool.
Right. Well, they didn't make it. They just made it fit you better.
Okay, so you look pretty sharp in that. I really don't understand what the different insignias mean. Maybe you could take us through them.
Well, I know this one here. This is a presidential citation. The whole unit got this.
Unit citation.
And this is a infantry badge, and we was all infantry at that time. And we have a
over on this side. What does that mean?
That's the infantry.
Do you remember why the Silver Star was awarded?
Just because of the battles in Burma. All the battles in Burma, and what we had accomplished. Spatial service. One thing that out of our outfit, the Rangers, the 75th Rangers today, they use our same shoulder patch today as we had it, and so they are doing the same thing today that we did back over 50 years ago.
They're the Merrill Marauders of the 21st century.
Right, they are.
And that patch on your jacket is the same that we're seeing up here in this box.
This is an old Merrill's patch. These were probably made before it was ever authorized, because it has to be authorized.
Yeah. You made it up as you went along, I guess.
We have a Merrill's Association today, and as you know, I'm 83, and most of them are older than I am, and they're dying off like flies, really. So the Rangers, the 75th Rangers, they can belong to Merrill's also at this time.
Okay.
So that there'll be young people carry on this association.